I'm your host, Lauren, and together let's explore what it really means to embrace authenticity in a world that often values conformity. If you've ever felt the pull to challenge the status quo or deepen your connection to self, you're in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of Not So Status Quo. I know the topic today is going to hit deep with some of you, and I am sorry in advance if you feel called out. But we are all here doing the work so that we can have the best damn life possible. So hopefully you'll thank me for it. So we are going to be talking about something that so many of us feel, but often struggle to act on. It's like this deep knowing that it's time for change or reinvention, but we don't do anything about it. And look, I'm just going to come out and say it that a lot of people think they deal well with change, but when you actually look at their life and see that they are staying in a job that they really don't like, or maybe they keep putting off making lifestyle changes that they know they need to, this really does paint a different story. So, how does that land with you? Maybe right now you're listening to this and you're feeling restless, like the version of you that once felt aligned no longer fits. Maybe you're craving something different, but second guessing whether you can actually make a pivot. Maybe you've been waiting for permission, someone to tell you that it's okay to want more or to evolve or to step into something new. Well, consider this episode your cue to give yourself that permission slip. Because the fact is, you are allowed to change. Let me repeat that. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to walk away from a path that is no longer aligned. You are allowed to step into new chapters. You are allowed to rewrite your story. And you are allowed to reinvent yourself as many times as you need to. And to be frank, reinventing yourself more than once was something that I really needed to give myself permission to do. And tackle my own insecurities around this. Now, we are going to unpack a fair bit in this episode, and a few of the topics that we'll cover is why reinvention is such a natural and necessary part of life. And I'm not sure why more people aren't talking about this. We'll also talk about the biggest fears that often hold us back from change and how to break through them. We'll look at the signs that you're ready for reinvention, even if you're currently doubting yourself. We'll look at how to navigate the discomfort that comes from evolving into a new version of you and why giving yourself permission to change is absolutely critical and such a boss move. So, if you have ever felt stuck in an identity that doesn't feel like it fits anymore, if you've been hesitating to make a change because you're afraid of what others will think, or if you're just craving something more, I know this feeling so well, this episode is going to be for you. Let me start by asking you, what if the version of you that you're clinging on to is actually holding you back from the life that you truly want? I said it. And if that were the case, perhaps reinvention on some level is going to be required. So let's talk about reinvention. For so many of us, the idea of changing, whether it's shifting a career or leaving a relationship or even just how we show up in the world, that can feel really scary. We often resist it because we associate change with uncertainty, maybe even loss and even failure. We tell ourselves, what if I make the wrong decision? What if people don't understand? What if I end up worse off than before? But here's what I want you to consider. What if change is actually the key to stepping into the life you're truly meant for, the one that you can't stop thinking about? And without change, you will continue to live the same existence day in and day out. Now, I don't know about you, but that idea of living the same existence over and over is not appealing to me whatsoever. And when we talk about reinvention, I want to highlight that it isn't about abandoning who you are or forgetting the version of you who got you here. Not at all. It's about becoming more of who you really are. The true, authentic you, I harp on about this all the time. It's about shedding the layers that no longer fit. It's liberating the parts of you that perhaps you've been suppressing or downplaying, okay? And the roles that you've outgrown and the expectations that were never truly yours to begin with. Look, the truth is, we are meant to evolve. It is just biology. The version of you that felt aligned 5 years ago or even 6 months ago might not be the version that serves you today, and that's okay. And that's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of growth. We need to start looking at it for what it truly is. So instead of resisting reinvention, plot twist, what if we learned to embrace it? What if we saw it as a natural, necessary part of stepping into a more fulfilling life? Because when we stop clinging to identities that no longer fit us anymore, we create space for something even better to come through. We have to clear out the old to make way for the new. Now, as a life transformation mentor, I typically have people coming to me who know they desire change and are seeking a clear path towards their goals and their dream life. There's so much strength in realizing you do not have to do it alone. And there are proven systems that can literally shorten the curve for you. Anyway, even though pretty much all of my status aligned clients come to me desiring change, their intuition has been telling them for quite some time that it is absolutely time. There are a few telltale signs that they haven't actually yet given themselves permission to actually change. The first thing that I see is that they constantly talk about making a change, or they had been talking about making a change for a really long time, but they never seem to take action. They would often say things like, one day I'll quit my job and I'll start this, or I'd really love to turn my passion into this thing. But they've been saying it for so long and they never really took a first step. But of course, then they came to me, and that was amazing because something inside them shifted. And this is obviously an incredible first step. Another thing that I see so frequently, and I'm so guilty of this, is that they stay in environments that drain them and they know it. Whether that's a toxic workplace, an unsupportive relationship, or a social circle that no longer aligns, they remain in spaces that don't allow them to grow or change because it feels really scary or it seems inconvenient. The other really big one that I notice is that they tend to hold on to an old version of themselves. So maybe once they identified themselves as the responsible one or the person who always follows the rules. And the idea of stepping outside that identity feels way too uncomfortable, even if they've really truly outgrown it. But we will talk about this a little more because this isn't something that usually springs to mind when you think about change and reinvention. A couple of signs that I haven't really seen much in my status aligned clients, but absolutely did so in my previous client work, is people feeling like it's too late. So, whether that's a career shift, a career move, or a lifestyle change, they've almost convinced themselves that they've missed their chance, they've missed the opportunity, even though deep down they still really want it. Also, another one, again, I don't really see this with my status aligned clients, but absolutely regularly in my previous client work, is that some people feel resentment or frustration, but they don't take ownership. They might feel stuck. They might feel jealous of others who have made really bold, incredible moves. And maybe even annoyed at their own situation. But instead of seeing it as a sign that something needs to shift, they blame a lot of external circumstances. I've also seen people who downplay their dreams or desires because they don't feel like they can actually pursue it, or they constantly seek validation before making decisions instead of trusting their own judgment. And I've also seen where people completely avoid discomfort at all costs. And as we know, reinvention does require some level of uncertainty, which means a level of discomfort. The key difference between these examples and someone who has given themselves permission to change is really, really simple. It's action. Even small steps like choosing a different thought pattern, making a tiny change, or even saying yes to a new opportunity. These all signal that someone is open to growth rather than staying stuck in a reality that does not fit them anymore. So, today we are going to be talking about what it really means to give yourself permission to change and how to step into your reinvention era with confidence. Because, girl, I know it can feel scary. I think the best place to start is to discuss why we often resist change. Now, I want to highlight that many of the topics we do discuss in these deep dive solo episodes are very intertwined with our mindset, our past experiences, any traumas, and each one of us is so unique. However, from my experience, a lot of the time, resisting change often comes down to fear, and fear in a variety of different ways. The first one that comes to mind is fear of judgment. We're so worried about what our family will think, what our friends will think, what Jennifer from high school will think, what the rest of society will think. We put so much pressure on ourselves that often keeps us stuck. We can often feel so much pressure to stick to what you've started, even if it no longer aligns with you anymore. And I've seen this in clients where instead of embracing who they're becoming, they stay in the safe zone to avoid what others might think. They have said things like, "What if people don't understand?" Or, "What if they think that I've changed?" As if it's a bad thing. These are the people who often look for a reason to stay the same rather than take the leap. Now, there is a societal expectation that I have noticed is starting to shift, and that is that we must follow a linear path in life, career, relationships, study, identity. We will notice this shift more and more with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who are already challenging societal norms in a really big way. And it is important to highlight that there are generational differences in perspective on this and how our parents might not see eye to eye with the choices that their children are making. These generational differences, as well as difference in culture as well, can really leave people feeling a huge sense of judgment for making decisions that go against the grain of their family unit or of the society or culture that they're growing up in. I can tell you that hands down, one of the top themes in my DMs is women who so want to change. They want to make a big life change. Oftentimes, it's wanting to end a relationship, and they've been putting it off for so many years out of fear of being ostracized from their communities, from being rejected by their family, feeling judged by their friends. And it honestly is so powerful. It really does keep people stuck. And that's really difficult to see because these women want more for themselves. They want more for their lives. And they know that they would be living a much more happy and fulfilling existence. And unfortunately, the judgment just paralyzes them. Now, I can't relate to this on that level. I can understand, of course, we all experience fear of judgment. I know when I was putting myself out there on Instagram with status aligned and consistently showing up in that way, I was really fearful of being seen and fearful of judgment as well. Absolutely. In fact, I actually have a fashion label called Elk. It's on pause at the moment, but when I first released Elk, I was so adamant that I did not want to be the face of the brand. I didn't want to be on social media. And a lot of that was around that fear of judgment and that fear of being seen and what people would think. And anyway, then I put myself out there with status aligned. And it did take a few months to really just let go and release that fear of judgment. Because at the end of the day, these people can judge all they want. I'm the one that's living my existence. I'm the one that gets to determine what kind of life that I'm living. And ultimately, it came down to loving and respecting myself more than the fear of their judgment. And at the end of the day, people are always going to have opinions. Like, we know this. We know people will always cast judgment. It doesn't matter what you do. You stay stuck, people will judge. You grow and evolve, people are going to judge. But do you want to live your life for them or for yourself? Knowing they're going to judge either way, I want to be living my best friggin' life possible. The other common fear is a fear of failure. Have you ever thought, what if I make this big change and it doesn't work out? Or have you ever found yourself feeling like, oh, but if I make this change, I would have wasted so much of my time or I would have wasted so much energy? The fear that you're wasting your time, you're wasting your investment, we need to change our mindset around that because oftentimes we need to go through all of the experiences that we've had in our life in order to graduate to that next level of life. So think of that as the necessary steps. It wasn't a waste. Every experience that you've had has served a purpose. And you're allowed to pivot at any time. In fact, that may have been the plan for you all along. Another fear I just want to touch on very, very quickly is a fear of success because it is a very real thing for people and it can also keep people very stuck because they're worried that, oh my gosh, what am I going to do if this actually really takes off? And what if this really amplifies my life in the best possible way because they're just not used to it? All right, so the next one I mentioned a little earlier and it's around identity attachment. When we've been known for something for so long, changing feels like losing a part of ourselves. Letting go of our titles, of our roles, of our past versions of self can be so unsettling. We especially see this with elite athletes. Now, I was never an elite athlete growing up. I was an athlete, and I did have a very strong identity centered around Lauren, the basketball player. Now, I didn't play basketball for all of my 20s, and yet I still thought of myself as a basketball player. Now, I can't imagine what it would be like for someone who has played at the highest level to exit their sport, particularly when they don't identify with anything more than being that sports person. The same can be said for women whose whole identity is their job, and then they go and have a baby. All of a sudden, that career woman, that corporate woman, whatever their role was, has been shattered. They feel like it's gone. They don't know who they are anymore because their day to day is now spending raising a child. And having an identity crisis in these situations is so normal, especially when we tie ourselves so heavily to a particular identity. It's really important to acknowledge to yourself that you are so much more than one version of yourself. Growth and evolution is your natural state. That is who you are. And throughout your life, there are going to be so many different versions of you, and all of them existed to make you who you are. Let's briefly talk about the signs that you're ready for reinvention. Now, I'm not going to spend a long time talking about this because I've already spoken about signs that you have outgrown your current reality in a previous episode. So go check that one out. And I know that at least one of these is going to resonate with you. Maybe you are experiencing this right now, and don't try to convince me otherwise. So maybe you're feeling restless or uninspired in your current situation. Maybe you're catching yourself saying, I've outgrown this, or this isn't me anymore, or I used to like this, but I don't really like this anymore. Maybe you're beginning to feel a little bit more excited about possibilities than you are afraid of them. And that's a really telltale sign. You may also be feeling really pulled towards something different. Even if you don't know exactly what it is, you know that it's not your current reality. And this is where we need to talk about giving yourself permission to change. Because giving yourself permission to change is one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself. And many of us don't even realize that this is something that we actually even need to do. So often we wait for external validation before making a move. We look for signs, for approval, for some kind of guarantee that things will work out. But the reality is, no one is going to hand you permission to evolve. That permission must and has to come from you. Yes, you can be inspired, like hopefully you are now through this conversation, through this podcast, but permission ultimately needs to come with sincerity from yourself, with love. And yet, so many of us hesitate. Like we discussed, we cling to old versions of ourselves because they feel familiar, even when they no longer feel comfortable. We tell ourselves, but I've already put so much time into this, or what will people think if I suddenly change direction? And before we know it, we are living a life that feels more like an obligation than an authentic expression of who we really are. And that will never bring us true happiness or fulfillment. But here's what I want you to know: changing your mind is not failing. Outgrowing something doesn't mean that you are wrong for choosing it in the first place. I've had to grapple with this. It just means that you are evolving. I truly believe that the moment you give yourself permission to change, to explore and to pivot, to rewrite your own rules, is the moment that you will take back the ownership of your life. And how freaking empowering does that sound? Because staying the same for the sake of consistency will never be as fulfilling as growing into the person that you are meant to be. And you will not be able to suppress those thoughts, those intuition, those nudges as much as you try. And it really can be as simple as having a really honest conversation with yourself, taking a step back and assessing your life. What feels good? What doesn't feel good? What doesn't feel right anymore? Write it down. Ask yourself, what would this change mean for me? How would successfully implementing this change and everything working out in a perfect world, how would that feel? Tap into the emotion. The emotion is everything here. Acknowledge the fear. Acknowledge that apprehension is normal and that stepping out of your comfort zone into uncharted territory is going to feel uncomfortable, but that is because your brain is doing its job. So, what are some of the ways you can further support yourself through a transition of change? There are a couple of things that will really help you empower yourself. And the first one is detaching from the old you. So you need to unsubscribe from the narrative that you've been telling yourself. Stop defining yourself by who you used to be. You don't need permission from your past self to evolve. We are in the present, we are looking to the future, and you, the present version of you, is going to give yourself permission. An affirmation that you could use here is, I am allowed to change my mind, my path, and my life. The second thing is get comfortable with uncertainty. Reinvention requires stepping into the unknown. Instead of looking for guarantees, focus on curiosity. Think of it as an experiment, not a permanent decision. If you make a choice to step out into the unknown, maybe it's to make a career change and things don't work out, you can change again. You can change again. Honestly, what's the worst that can happen? That you've left after a few months and now they have to do another recruitment again? I mean, I get it. I've been the recruiting manager before. It's incredibly frustrating when people leave, but it's their life. Like, I'm not living their life. I would much rather see an employee who is miserable and who's affecting culture and who is not happy and not doing their job leave. Like, I'm not going to get the most out of them. I'm not going to get the best out of them. I'm not going to get the best for my clients, for my business, for the program, whatever. Like, yeah, you might make people annoyed, but so they're not living your life and you're not living theirs. I think often we put so much unnecessary pressure on ourselves to have the decisions that we make work out. And that is absolutely not fair for us to be doing to ourselves. So release that expectation of yourself. You are allowed to change. Another thing that you could do is start with small moves. Look, we are not here to burn everything down overnight, okay? I mean, you can if you want to, but that is not the requirement. You can just dip the toe. You can just try a new hobby. You can switch up your routine. You could start a side project. Every small step builds confidence in your ability to navigate change. One of my favorite things to recommend to people, and I do this in my very first session with new clients, is getting them to identify and surround themselves with expanders. Who do you follow or spend time with that inspires your reinvention? It is so important to look for people that prove that change is possible because our brains need to see it to believe it. You really are the product of the people that you surround yourself with and the content that you consume, so choose wisely. Another one that is so powerful is embracing the idea that you are always evolving. It sounds so simple, but there is no final version of you. Reinvention isn't something that you only do once, it is literally a lifelong process. Now, I want you to imagine that I am stepping through your speakers or through your headphones and I am appearing in front of you and I'm going to take you by the hands and I'm going to say this with so much love. You are allowed to outgrow things. You are allowed to change directions. You are allowed to want more for yourself. You are allowed to feel scared and apprehensive. You're allowed to feel like you're unsure, that you don't have a clear path forward. You are allowed to experience and feel all of these things. But you deserve to live the most beautiful, aligned life, one that you cannot wait to get out of bed for. So if you are listening to this and any of what I've spoken about has hit home, and you feel like I am literally talking directly to you today, I want you to reflect. What is one area of your life where you've been resisting change? What would it feel like to give yourself permission to make that change? To embrace your true, authentic self, to honor the authentic version of you by making even a small step towards the life or that thing that you truly desire. Now, if this episode resonated, I would love if you could share it with somebody else, someone else that needs a gentle reminder or a not so gentle reminder that they are allowed to change and grow, and that it is okay for them to change parts of their current reality or all of their current reality if they choose. Reinvention can feel so scary, but oh my goodness, the most beautiful time of your life as well. All right, my new friends, thank you for joining me to discuss reinvention and giving yourself permission to change because you deserve it. And I look forward to catching you in the next episode of Not So Status Quo.